I'm just gathering this blue fabric to add a little decorative accent touch to this baby quilt I've been making. What I need to do is put the borders on. So I've cut these borders, but when I lay them next to the quilt, you can see there's not that much contrast there. It's not a very defined border. So I want to do something to just make that stand out just a little bit more. So I'm going to put a very thin decorative little strip in there. It'll be like a fake piping almost. So I've cut some strips. These are the strips. They're not quite the same colour, they're a little bit darker, and I think that'll be a nice contrast there. I cut 1-inch strips and then I've ironed them in half. And what I'm going to do is just lay them along here. So I measured this edge and it measured out at 35 inches. I've cut my strips just very, very slightly longer, just to make sure that they overlap okay. And all the way around, I'm going to pin these in place. At the same time I cut those, I also cut for my binding, because I'm going to do my binding in a matching colour. Get some pins here. Now I am just going to mark the centre of this binding. And then I'm going to mark the centre of my quilt side. And I'm just going to match those up. And now I'm going to lay this out and pin it down the side. And you'll see I'm pinning the raw edge to the raw edge. And this little fold will stay towards the centre of the quilt. So I'm going to pin that all the way along, and then I'm going to put my border on the top. So this border has a direction. So as long as I make sure that I put them both in the same direction. So in this case, I'm going to have the tiger with its feet to the quilt. So I'm going to turn that there. So I'm just going to mark this centre. And I know that this is the centre of my, need it wrong side down. I know this is the centre of my quilt because I've already got that marked, and I'm going to pin that there. And as I put these pins in, I'm taking the underneath ones out. So I'm going to pin that all the way along. Now this I've cut exactly to size, so this one will be pinned to match the edges of the underneath quilt. This little overhang, I'm just leaving in there. And at the end, I'll just trim those off. So all the way along here now, I'm just going to pin this in place. Through the little decorative edge and through the back of the quilt. So I'll just go on ahead and I'm going to pin both sides in the same way. I've pinned all this side down now. The little binding is in between. I've just pinned the border on 2 edges because I need to sew those first before I cut the border for the top and the bottom. But I am going to put in the little binding strip. This is because at the side here, I want it to be underneath and secured along there. So I need it to be in there before I sew along. Before I sew along this edge here, it needs to be, the end of it needs to be tucked in there already so that it'll catch the stitch. So I just need to take this little strip and in just the same way I did on the first side, put this along the edge. And the only difference is I'm not going to put that many pins in. I only need it to be secured at the edges, but I'll have to pin it to make sure that I get the size right. So again, I'm just finding the center and finding the center of my quilt here. Oh, it's right on that seam there. So I can just put a pin in that side. I can see where that is. And let me match those together here. Again, raw edges to the outside. And then I'm just going to smooth it along, make sure it's going to lay properly and fit properly. I'm going to just lift that pin out for a minute. Put a pin in there for a second just to hold it out of the way. Put that pin in there. So now when I lay this back down, when I sew my seam, it'll tether that end into place. Then when I open that, the other border will fit along there and that corner edge will all be hidden. Can you see that? That's tethered there, and I put that down over there and sew along the edge. That part will already be sewn in, and when I put the other border on this side, all this edging will be hidden, and I'll go ahead and trim those corners then. So I'm going to put the other one on just the same way. Do you notice as well, I've actually got a lot of pins in this side, and that's because I want to make sure that these layers stay in the right place when I'm sewing. I don't typically use a lot of pins, but because this is hidden underneath, I don't want it to be slid out of the way and I haven't seen it. And if you were really concerned about that, you could also just run a tacking line down that edge if you wanted to, but I think the pins will be sufficient. This is all pins, so I'm just going to carefully sew along the edge of this border, making sure that all my edges stay lined up, and using a 1/4 inch seam. Seam's done, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the other side seam just the same, just to give you a quick preview though of what it will look like, and then I'll do the other side seam, press it, and then I'll show you. I just doubled the quilt and measured it. it's 20 inches, so that means I need to cut a top and bottom border that are 40 inches. I've got this top hole pinned on, just the same as the side seam. I can't fold it all the way back because of the pins, but the little blue flashes down there. One thing I did do though was where I had these little overhangs here, I did just go ahead and trim those off. So I'm just going to machine this. I'm not going to show that on camera because it's just a machine row the same as I did the first side. So the top and the bottom, I'm just going to go ahead and machine those, and then I'll show you the finished result. The binding's done on this quilt. Smooth a little bit slowly. It's hard to get it all in. Jess, come off. I've got it laying on the batting ready for pinning for quilting, and I was just really trying to show you kind of what the little accent part looked like that we've just put on. And down here I've laid the this piece here because that's what it'll look like with the binding in this corner. And I think that's good. I think I could actually have used a little bit darker fabric even for this to set it off more, but I'm pleased with that result. So you might like to try this on a quilt. You can see how simple and easy it is, and it really just gives it that extra touch as well.